Good morning and good afternoon. We're here today thanks to all who responded to IIE's many surveys as we charted new territory in documenting and coping with nearly 2 years of this pandemic. Exactly 100 years ago, IIE conducted its very first census of international students in the United States. It turned out to be historic in several respects. Students from over 120 countries were counted, representing nearly all of the then existing states and territories in the entire world. The total was 6,437, and it showed that for the first time America had become the leading destination for study abroad, eclipsing England and Germany, which had held the record for over 500 years. It foreshadowed also from where the largest number of students would consistently come to the United States. Indeed, of the top 10 then, 4 are still in the top 10 today. And 108 Nobel Prizes would subsequently be won by international students counted in the census who had engaged in an international educational exchange program of the Department of State or of the Institute of International Education. Behind all of the Open Doors statistics are generations who truly think that international and education go together, and even during pandemics. The numbers you'll hear about shortly will affirm this, and they suggest that making this an international education century for many more may be the best investment any of us have in shaping the outlook of the next generation who will lead the world we share. It's now my pleasure to introduce Acting Assistant Secretary of State Matthew Lussenhop to give the opening remarks. Matt?
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to welcome you on behalf of the U.S. Department of State, our colleagues in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs that support your work, and the thousands of people facilitating international educational exchange at our many embassies, consulates, and American spaces abroad. I would like to thank Alan Goodman and the entire staff at IIE, the Institute of International Education, especially the research team led by Dr. Mirka Martel. The IIE team does incredible work each year to gather and analyze Open Doors data and develop this report. I'd also like to thank the academic team in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs as well. Open Doors is a critical resource for the United States, U.S. partner governments overseas, and the global higher education community. Open Doors sets the standard for data and trend analysis on student and scholar mobility and is essential for informed planning and decision-making. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs is proud to partner with IIE and fund this report. We could not produce Open Doors without the support of U.S. colleges and universities. So thank you to all of the U.S. higher education institutions that responded to the survey and provided essential student mobility data from their campuses. It's wonderful to be with you today and to help kick off the 2021 International Education Week, an annual joint initiative between the U.S. Departments of State and Education. And what an excellent opportunity to highlight and celebrate the good work that you at our colleges and universities do each and every day across the higher education sector. So thank you to everyone who contributed to this year's report. The United States and the entire U.S. government is deeply committed to international education. Secretary Blinken recently called international education a foreign policy imperative. And earlier this year, he stated, "Having a greater sense of the interdependence of the global community is a critical part of higher education, especially in the age of COVID-19 and the climate crisis." And in July, Secretary Blinken and Secretary of Education Cardona issued a joint statement of principles in support of international education. And this statement outlines 10 principles to guide a coordinated U.S. national approach to renew our focus on international education. The joint statement recognizes the value of student mobility for both U.S. and international students. By studying together, they establish strong, lasting bonds that form the basis of future business, trade, scientific, and diplomatic relations. And over time, these people-to-people ties foster innovation and economic prosperity and promote the peace and security of the United States and nations around the world. The United States remains the top destination for international students from across the globe, welcoming more than 914,000 students from over 200 places of origin in the 2020 to 2021 academic year. International students bolster the American economy, contributing $39 billion and supporting 416,000 U.S. jobs during the 2019-2020 academic year. And international students build lifelong connections with American peers to maintain and grow America's international partnerships and to collectively address current and future global challenges. Attracted to the U.S. by our country's leadership in research and innovation, international students, researchers, scholars, and exchange alumni engage in scientific collaboration with their American peers, and they have made significant contributions to the development of treatments and vaccines for COVID-19 and in so many other STEM-related fields. This type of research collaboration between higher education institutions across the globe are central to our economy and our foreign policy. As you know, the global pandemic affected international educational exchange and student mobility around the world, and the United States was not immune. But throughout the pandemic, the United States remained open and welcoming to international students. U.S. higher education institutions demonstrated tremendous dedication and flexibility in their support of international students. U.S. colleges and universities have prioritized the safety of all students, both domestic and international, during the pandemic. They supported international students by implementing online and hybrid teaching modalities, as well as additional flexibilities in admissions and enrollment policies. And many institutions allowed students to enroll in fully online study programs or even defer enrollment to a future date. So we applaud the incredible support that the entire higher education community has provided to international students in this challenging time. The U.S. government also supported international students by allowing those who were already in the United States at the time of the outbreak to remain here and safely continue their studies, and by providing flexibilities where possible to students seeking visas and looking to begin their studies at a U.S. college or university. All these efforts exemplify the shared commitment across our government and university sectors to international student mobility and global higher education. At the Department of State, we maintained and even increased our engagement with international students. The State Department exchange programs, including our flagship Fulbright program, continued to operate where safe to do so, and we were able to keep thousands of foreign Fulbright students here throughout. Our global network of Education USA student advising centers shifted to online programming and continued to operate in 175 countries and territories around the world, developing new and innovative programs to support U.S. colleges and universities and reach international students. To coincide with the announcement of the joint statement in support of international education, Education USA released the first in a series of videos promoting study in the United States under the hashtag StudyWithUS. And as we continue these efforts, the United States remains the top destination for international students from across the globe. The 2021 Fall Snapshot, a preliminary survey produced by IIE of U.S. higher education institutions hosting international students, shows a rebound in numbers this fall, indicating that international students continue to value a U.S. education and remain committed to pursuing study in the United States. Prior to the pandemic, over 347,000 students studied abroad, and the global pandemic essentially halted all international travel for U.S. students in March 2020. U.S. higher education Institutions prioritized student safety and quickly repatriated thousands of American students from study abroad programs around the world. And colleges and universities swiftly adapted to enable students to remain globally engaged through a variety of virtual and hybrid international programs. At the State Department, we've also learned lessons about effective virtual and hybrid international programming, including how to expand access to broader and more diverse student audiences. So we look forward to working with higher education institutions to maintain and adapt these virtual best practices as a complement to in-person exchanges. And as student demand soars and study abroad returns, we must recommit ourselves to ensuring that international educational experiences become ever more accessible and reflective of the rich diversity of the United States. This has long been a priority for the Bureau of ECA. And President Biden has made clear through a number of bold and ambitious initiatives that we must all prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as a national security imperative to ensure that critical perspectives and talents are represented in this sector. Study abroad and global educational programs are essential to the development of the next generation of American leaders in all fields. And through programs like our flagship Fulbright Exchanges, the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program, and other exchanges and programs for scholars, students, teachers, professionals, and citizens, we're working hard to expand access to international educational experiences for all Americans. And there's no doubt that the past 20 months have presented us with unprecedented challenges that have impacted everyone, including the U.S. government, the global academic community, and international and American students alike. However, the strength and resilience that we have all demonstrated has been nothing short of inspiring. We continue to focus on rebuilding academic exchanges and student mobility post-pandemic. And we look forward to collaborating with our friends and colleagues across the higher education sector to build back better from the pandemic and celebrate important milestones like the 75th anniversary of the Fulbright program this year. The U.S. Department of State is committed to partnering with higher education institutions on international education to advance our common objectives. We will continue to work together to expand access to global learning and engagement opportunities for international and American students, scholars, and researchers. Together, we will continue to build lasting diplomatic ties, enhance economic prosperity, and promote global peace and security for all. Thank you.
Hello, I'm U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Each year at this time, the Departments of Education and State join education communities worldwide to celebrate International Education Week. And for the first time in over 20 years, we've released a joint statement of principles in support of international education. As our nation recovers and rebuilds from the global pandemic, we see more clearly than ever that communities and countries are interconnected. And our biggest challenges are global challenges. The only way to solve them is as an international community. That's why international education is so vital. It promotes mutual understanding and connection. It helps Americans from all walks of life better understand our world and engage with their neighbors who have different views and backgrounds. International education enhances students' global and cultural competency, gives insight and context for local, national, and global events, develops critical thinking, and fosters respect for diverse perspectives. The Department of Education's international and foreign language programs advance global connectivity and engagement. Flagship programs like the Fulbright Hays program, now marking its 60th anniversary, promote the exchange of ideas and collaboration across the globe. Our Title VI programs, including the National Resource Centers, language resource centers, and centers for international business education equip students with the expertise and resources to tackle challenges like climate change, global health, and economic development. I encourage all Americans to consider pursuing opportunities abroad to study or engage in internships, teaching, or research. I also believe that the incredible diversity of our nation's students is one of America's greatest strengths, and our country wholeheartedly welcomes international students, researchers, and scholars to our campuses to share their rich perspectives, cultures, and languages, as well as their creativity and innovation to enrich our communities. We're excited to see how you celebrate International Education Week this year. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Open Doors 2021 Annual Data Release. My name is Mirka Martel, Head of Research, Evaluation, and Learning at IIE. I am joined today by Leah Mason, Research Lead, to present findings from Open Doors 2021. Today, we will be presenting Open Doors 2021 data on international students studying at U.S. higher education institutions and on optional practical training, U.S. students studying abroad, and key trends in global student mobility. I will begin the presentation this morning with data on international students. Let's start by providing an overview of the International Student Census and updates we made this year. First, who received the survey? The Open Doors International Census surveyed nearly 3,000 U.S. higher education institutions that reported hosting international students in the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS. We benefit from the consistent, robust responses we receive each year from higher education institutions around the country. We want to highlight that U.S. higher education institutions in Open Doors represent every state and U.S. territory, public and private institutions. This year, our findings reflect 70% of the international student population at reporting institutions. Next, who did we count in the census? This year, Open Doors 2021 adapted its definition of an international student to give the most comprehensive picture of international students studying at U.S. higher education institutions. In Open Doors 2021, data on international students includes students enrolled at U.S. institutions and taking classes in person on U.S. campuses, online while in the United States, online from abroad, and finally, the data also includes students on optional practical training, or OPT. The 2021 academic year was a historic moment for international exchange and student mobility due to the global shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many international students were not able to travel to the United States due to travel restrictions. These updates to the student definition allowed us to capture the full picture of international student enrollments at U.S. institutions. I also want to share insight on the timeline reflected in Open Doors 2021. We collected data from U.S. institutions as of fall 2020 to reflect the 2020-21 academic year. However, we note that the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic leading up to the fall 2020 semester impacted the data. Throughout the spring and summer semesters, international student application, selection processes, and visa processes were severely impacted by the pandemic. Further, international student travel was also restricted. As a result, the fall 2020 semester saw largely hybrid models in place, with approximately 20% of international students studying online from abroad, according to the fall 2020 International Student Snapshot. And now to the data for 2020-21. In the 2020-21 academic year, the United States welcomed 914,095 international students for study, a decrease of 15% from the previous year. This decrease was primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since Open Doors' first reporting in the late 1940s, we have seen robust growth of international students in the United States. the 2020-21 academic year was a historic moment for international exchange and student mobility due to the global shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. U.S. universities showed incredible flexibility in offering international students multiple options to pursue their studies. Most international students studied at the undergraduate and graduate levels. Over 75% of all international students were either undergraduate or graduate students. Over 200,000 students pursued optional practical training, or OPT, for the fourth consecutive year. The number of enrolled international students in undergraduate, graduate, and non-degree programs decreased primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Undergraduate enrollments decreased by 14%, while graduate enrollments decreased by 12%. Due to the cancellation of many exchange and intensive English programs, students pursuing non-degree programs saw the sharpest decrease at 64%. OPT decreased for the first time at 9%. OPT numbers this year were influenced by two factors. First, the COVID-19 pandemic limited the number of students who opted for OPT and instead returned home. Second, the rate of OPT growth has slowed over the past several years. Larger cohorts of students from prior years have cycled through the system, and the incoming classes of new international students are smaller, slowing the OPT rate. If we look at enrolled international students further, we can divide them into those that are studying for the first time at their U.S. university, or new international students, and those continuing their studies. The number of new international students enrolling for the first time at a college or university fell to 145,528, reflecting a decrease of 46%. This was the primary driver of the overall decrease in international students. We see a better picture of international students continuing their studies, as the decrease among this group was just 3%, in line with a decrease we saw last year. This indicates that international students who were already enrolled at U.S. universities were committed to continuing their education. This year, international students came from over 200 places of origin. The top 3 places of origin continued to be China, India, and South Korea. China and India made up 53% of the total international student population. As we include the top 25 places of origin and beyond, we begin to see international students representing other regions, including Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. The number of Chinese students decreased by 15%, comparable to the rate of change among the general international student population. Indian students decreased by 13%. Our findings indicate that students from South Korea and Saudi Arabia decreased primarily due to large drops of students studying at the non-degree level. Finally, the decrease of students from Canada was smaller at 3%, perhaps indicating the ability of Canadian students to travel to the United States for study or ease of access to classes online. I want to pause a bit and look at regional findings because they reflect country findings and speak to differences in decreases by world region. As mentioned previously, the overall rate of decrease across all regions was 15%. However, we find that some regions, including Asia or Oceania, reflected the same or a steeper decline. It is possible that students from these regions were more impacted by travel restrictions, chose to study regionally, or were more greatly impacted by online study across different time zones. In comparison, for example, we see that decreases across Latin America and the Caribbean and Canada were less stark. In analyzing declines in Europe and sub-Saharan Africa, here we see the difference is in the types of degrees international students were pursuing. In Europe, for example, prior to the pandemic, a larger proportion of students pursued non-degree study, and this decreased by 84% in 2021. In comparison, in sub-Saharan Africa, most international students pursued degree programs, and these decreased at a lower rate than non-degree. International students are welcome to study at U.S. universities across the country. International students continue to make up 5% of all U.S. students in higher education. California, New York, and Texas continue to be the top 3 destinations for international students. As we include more states, we see that international students study at U.S. higher education institutions in every region across the country. We did find differences in how the COVID-19 pandemic affected international students at U.S. universities by type. You can see the composition of U.S. universities by type here. Doctoral universities make up the largest proportion of international student enrollments, followed by master's colleges and associate's colleges, or community colleges. When we look at the changes at these institutions in the 2020-21 year, we see that while doctoral universities only decreased by 13%, so better than the overall 15%, we see that master's colleges decreased by 23% and community colleges decreased by 24%. What this leads us to conclude is that the COVID-19 pandemic affected some U.S. institutions more than others, and it is important to keep this in mind as we move into the long-term effects of COVID-19 on these institutions. Next, let me share some data on fields of study. As in previous years, most international students, 54%, studied in STEM fields, primarily engineering and math and computer science. Engineering remains the most popular major for international students, with 1 in every 5 students pursuing this study. Students pursuing math and computer science and business and management were in the 2nd and 3rd spot. Fields of study across the spectrum declined in 2021. For example, while engineering and math and computer science were seeing surges in previous years, in 2021 they indicated a decline. Business and management, on the other hand, had already been declining, and the impact of COVID-19 exacerbated this decline. Students studying social sciences and physical and life sciences had seen steady inclines and have been impacted primarily by the COVID-19 pandemic. International students are significant contributors to the U.S. economy. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, international students contributed $39 billion to the U.S. economy in 2020, primarily through their education funding. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the contributions of international students remain significant and critical to the U.S. economy. Over half of international students contributed international funding sources, particularly personal funds, to fund their education. This number is particularly high for undergraduate students who often finance their education. Before I conclude, I want to touch on some of the findings from the 2021 Fall International Student Enrollment Snapshot. The snapshot is a joint endeavor between IIE and 9 other international education organizations and presents current international student enrollment patterns for the 2021-22 academic year. This year, we received data from over 860 U.S. higher education institutions, a subset of the institutions we survey as part of Open Doors. The profile of these institutions closely resembles that of institutions represented in Open Doors. We are happy to report that this is the highest response rate we have had in the 16-year history of this program, and these institutions represent 59% of all international students in Open Doors 2021. I would like to highlight 6 key findings from the Fall 2021 snapshot. First, the findings of the Fall snapshot reflect the resilience of U.S. higher education institutions and student mobility during the COVID-19 pandemic. The total number of international students, all enrolled and OPT, increased by 4% in Fall 2021. This is a rebound from the 15% decrease due to the COVID-19 pandemic in Fall 2020. We continue to include international students studying at U.S. campuses, as well as those online in the U.S. and abroad in this total. Second, most institutions reported an increase in the number of new international students studying at U.S. universities. 70% of institutions reported an increase in new international student enrollments. 10% indicated the number to be the same as last year, and 20% reported a decrease. These increases translate to an overall increase in new international students. Higher education institutions report a 68% increase in new international students enrolling for the first time at a U.S. institution, a surge from the 46% decline reported in fall 2020. We also found that 99% of responding institutions are holding classes in person or implementing a hybrid model. Only 1% of institutions are offering online classes only in fall 2021. At least 65% of institutions reported international students are on campus in the United States. U.S. institutions are committed to international student outreach and recruitment. Responding institutions are leveraging current international students at 64%, online recruitment events at 56%, and social media outreach at 55% to attract international students to their institutions. It is important to note that 77% of reporting institutions indicate that financial support for their student recruitment efforts is the same or higher than in previous years. Finally, U.S. institutions continue to prioritize international student outreach to India at 56% and China at 51%, and to international students at U.S. high schools at 44%. Following a challenging year in international educational exchange, the findings of the 2021 Fall International Student Enrollment Snapshot underscored the continued commitment of U.S. institutions to international education and further highlight the appeal of a U.S. education to international students. That concludes my portion, and I will now turn it over to Leah Mason to go over data on U.S. students studying abroad.
Thank you, Mirka. I'm pleased to present some of the key findings from Open Doors 2021 on U.S. students studying abroad. I first want to briefly go over the information we collected on U.S. study abroad in Open Doors 2021. We surveyed accredited U.S. higher education institutions that have study abroad programs. Our data collection focuses on U.S. students who are enrolled at U.S. higher education institutions who then go abroad for academic credit. We counted students who studied abroad during the 2019-20 academic year, from fall 2019 through summer 2020. This is 1 year prior to the year Mirka just referenced for international students. The reason for this time lag is that we need to allow time for students to go abroad, come back home, and then be awarded credit at their U.S. institution. Also, as Mirka noted, the data included in this year's analysis reflects how COVID-19 has impacted U.S. study abroad. The timeline here shows that fall 2019 programs commenced as usual. However, programs began to feel the impacts after the World Health Organization declared a pandemic in March 2020, and global travel restrictions affected student mobility. In the 2019-20 academic year, 162,633 U.S. students studied abroad for academic credit. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, higher education institutions canceled spring break travel and most summer 2020 programs, resulting in a 53.1% decline compared to 2018-19. When we step back to look at 20 years of data on U.S. study abroad for academic credit, we see that the number of students pursuing study abroad had steadily increased until we reached the 2019-20 academic year. Much of this growth had been driven by short-term study abroad, which includes experiences abroad for a summer or 8 weeks or less. However, as depicted in the timeline, cancellation of short-term spring break travel and most summer 2020 programs contributed to the 53% decline in 2019-20. Taking a closer look at the effect by duration, you can see here in this slide the difference in the number of students who participated in a study abroad program for academic credit in 2018-19 and 2019-20. Long-term and mid-length academic programs decreased comparatively less than short-term programs, as some of these programs could operate in the fall 2019 semester. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly affected short-term study abroad programs, particularly summer study programs, which comprised 39% of all U.S. study abroad programming in 2018-19. That decreased by 99% in 2019-20 to just 1,300 students. In addition to program cancellations, U.S. higher education institutions launched emergency efforts to prioritize the health and safety of their students, quickly returning students on study abroad programs to the United States in spring 2020. In total, 867 institutions reported that approximately 55,000 U.S. students returned home safely amid the COVID-19 pandemic, due in large part to the tireless work of study abroad providers. The large majority of these students were participating in mid-length programs. The changes to U.S. study abroad program affected institutions differently. The chart here shows the number of U.S. students at public and private not-for-profit institutions who studied abroad in 2018-19 and 2019-20. This information is further broken down by their duration of study, short-term, mid-length, and long-term. The impact of short-term program cancellations is evident when looking at this comparison. And although all institutions were affected, public institutions had a greater decline in the number of students who studied abroad from the previous year, with 61% in comparison to the 42% decline at private not-for-profit institutions. A similar comparison of the number of U.S. students who studied abroad in 2018-19 and 2019-20 by institution type and program duration reveals that all institutions were affected, though some significantly more so than others. Baccalaureate colleges had the smallest decline, 33%, in the number of students who studied abroad, while associate's colleges had the largest decline, 71%. And while we see that doctoral institutions had the largest number of students who studied abroad, the total number, 106,714, is more than 130,000 fewer students, a decline of 55%. Institutions seeking to support students who could not participate in a study abroad program outside of the United States in 2019-20 offered students an array of online global learning experiences. As a result, in addition to the 160,000 U.S. students who studied abroad, more than 10,000 students received academic credit for participation in an online global learning experience. The most popular online experiences offered by institutions included internships and consulting with global companies, collaborative project-based learning, and video conference dialogues. Nearly half of all institutions indicated that they offered multiple types of online global learning. For students who were able to participate in study abroad, Europe continued to be the predominant destination of choice, with more than half of all study abroad for academic credit back home taking place in Europe. When we look at the specific destination where students studied abroad, it is evident that every destination was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. On this map, we see that Spain, Italy, and the United Kingdom were the most popular destinations in 2019-20, which aligns with the trend we just noted of many U.S. students studying in Europe. These three destinations each hosted more than 19,000 students, comprising 1/3 of U.S. students who studied abroad. Historically, the most popular destination in Asia, China, saw a decline of 79% from 11,639 to fewer than 2,500 students. Study abroad in Japan and South Korea also fell by 62 and 57% respectively. Both destinations had seen consistent increases over the last decade. However, when we take a step back to look at the whole map, we can see that despite the pandemic, U.S. students traveled across the world to gain global perspectives, with popular destinations on every continent. In 2019-20, institutions reported U.S. students studying in more than 180 destinations. And when we return to a view of the world regions, we can see how every region was affected with declines in the number of U.S. students studying abroad from the 2018-19 academic year to 2019-20. This chart highlights in yellow the world regions with declines greater than the 53% overall decline. As the COVID-19 pandemic affected Asian countries earlier, the region saw a 64% decline in study abroad. Highlighted in green are the world regions that had less than a 53% decline. And while we can see that Europe hosted the most U.S. study abroad students, the total number, 94,230, is nearly 100,000 fewer students than the previous academic year, a 51% decline. I now want to look at the characteristics of U.S. students studying abroad, beginning with the student profile. In 2019-20, the proportion of racial and ethnic minority students remained relatively stable from the previous year, comprising 30% of the study abroad population. This number reflects the diversity of U.S. students going abroad and the growth seen over the past 20 years, which saw racial and ethnic diversity increase from only 15% of students. In 2019-20, the overall U.S. study abroad student profile remained similar to previous years. Hispanic or Latino students comprise 11% of students, while Asian, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islanders and Black or African American students account for 9% and 6% of students, respectively. 2 out of every 3 U.S. students who study abroad are female. The COVID-19 pandemic affected all fields of study, with declines of 50% across the board. Business and management and the social sciences have long been the most popular majors for students pursuing study abroad, and remained so in 2019-20. Another way that study abroad has diversified is through the types of activities that students pursue. In addition to 4-credit study abroad, which all of my previous slides focused on, institutions may offer non-credit study abroad opportunities, providing a wealth of unique experiences for students. In 2019-20, 252 institutions reported that more than 11,000 U.S. students participated in an experiential activity and did not receive credit at their home campus for their time abroad. We found that the most popular activity among non-credit study abroad was volunteering or on service learning trips, with a reported 31% of the students engaged in this type of activity. Other non-credit activities include work, field experiences, internships, research, conferences, or performing arts trips abroad. I now want to highlight the comprehensive picture of study abroad. In 2019-20, more than 160,000 students went abroad for academic credit, and another 11,000 students pursued a non-credit educational opportunity abroad. In addition to study abroad by U.S. students enrolled in the United States, we also know that U.S. students travel abroad to pursue full degrees in other countries. So these are not students enrolled in U.S. institutions, but those that are going directly to other countries to earn a full degree. Through our Project Atlas work, we identified more than 40,000 U.S. students who were pursuing a full degree abroad in 2019-20. In sum, more than 200,000 U.S. students engaged in education abroad in 2019-20. Now that we have an understanding of mobility to and from the United States, I would like to take a look at the broader picture of global student mobility. Project Atlas was created in 2001 to put in context the Open Doors data and see how it fits in the global picture of other host countries that are attracting large numbers of international students. Today, Project Atlas has 30 partner organizations who are part of the national data collection in their country and who share with us the information they have on international students coming to their country using the same definition that Open Doors uses. The information reported in this section of the presentation is from our Project Atlas partners, who allow us to post their data online and share with you a picture that is useful to researchers, other countries, and planners around the world who host international students. This year, we welcomed Una Italia and Study in Israel to the Project Atlas initiative. I would like to thank Una Italia, Study in Israel, and all of the Project Atlas partners who shared information about international students and the higher education context in their countries this year. Thank you. Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, the UNESCO Institute for Statistics reported that the total number of globally mobile international students had reached 6.1 million in 2019. From our conversations with Project Atlas partners, we know that in many countries, while the number of international students had increased steadily through 2019, international students around the world and every country that hosted them were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's presentation of Open Doors data has focused on the U.S. data. However, other leading host countries are at varying stages of data collection for the same time frame. We know that a multitude of factors have affected global mobility starting in late 2019. Among the leading host countries, nearly every higher education institution reported pivoting to a virtual or hybrid model of instruction at some point during the 2020-21 academic year to provide students with instructional continuity. Throughout the 2020-21 academic year, higher education institutions continuously assessed instructional priorities alongside public health and safety guidelines to include border closures. The mode of instruction for students who were enrolled during the 2020-21 academic year had implications for other aspects of students' lives, including their health and wellness, as well as finances. Higher education institutions across the globe partnered with organizations and associations to respond to students' varied needs. Many of the traditional push and pull factors that we look at in relation to global academic mobility remain more relevant than ever as students and institutions reassess the value of an international degree and reflect on how higher education is delivered and experienced in the COVID-19 era. Recent studies report that students are prioritizing health and safety in their selection of where to study. However, as borders open in some countries, mode of instruction is increasingly a persuasive factor for students, with some eager to participate in in-person coursework in a host country and others taking advantage of the open door of opportunity to pursue study at a desired institution without the financial burden of travel and accommodations outside of their home country. While the data presented today reflects and records mobility at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the pandemic's effect on global academic mobility will be seen in time. We know today from IIE's COVID Snapshot series and similar surveys conducted by Project Atlas partners that the impact on student mobility has been felt around the world. At the student level, short-term exchange programs were disrupted. Some have now resumed, while others remain paused. Continuing international student enrollments remained stable, as new international student enrollment declined. the International Association of Universities Global Survey reported on the effects of the pandemic on institutions, noting it has been very uneven between different regions of the world and also between different institutions in the same world region. However, institutions globally have and are continuing to adapt and innovate in support of international mobility. Our Project Atlas partners continue to hear from students and the institutions that host them that international students remain interested and are motivated to seek out higher education opportunities abroad. Before concluding our presentation today, we want to share with you several resources. We invite you to the Open Doors website to explore, download, and share the Open Doors data. Today, all of the 2021 data has been updated and is now available. We invite you to please take a moment to explore the website and our newest data. We also want to thank the organizations that made today possible. First and foremost, we want to thank the U.S. State Department for their continued support of the Open Doors project. Please access the State Department resources noted on this slide to learn more about how you can celebrate the benefits of international education and exchange worldwide during International Education Week, and connect with Education USA and USA Study Abroad. We also want to thank our many partners on Open Doors, organizations that help us review and distribute the Open Doors surveys each year. We also want to highlight our partners who worked with us on the Fall 2021 Snapshot Survey. And this project would not be possible without the more than 2,900 U.S. higher education institutions that receive our survey and take the time to respond each year. Thank you. Finally, we invite you to continue the conversation. Please reach out to Open Doors for any inquiries regarding data or to discuss a custom analysis. For any press inquiries, please email press@iie.org. To join the conversation on social media, use our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn icons located in the upper right of the screen, and tag your post to ensure that Open Doors remains part of the discussion. We want to thank you for listening today, and we wish you a pleasant day.